Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're heading to India, specifically to a really fascinating city, Chandigarh.
Yeah, we're digging into some great material from City Chronicles, the travel podcast. They did a whole feature on it.
And Chandigarh is special, isn't it? It's not just any city.
Not at all. It's actually India's first planned city built after independence. And the design, well, that came from the famous Swiss-French architect, Le Corbusier.
Right. So that's our mission for you today, to really get under the skin of Chandigarh. What makes people call it modern, green, so well organized, especially compared to maybe the more chaotic image some folks have of big Indian cities.
So let's start with the basics. The layout. City Chronicles spent some time on this. The sector system.
Ah, yes, the sectors. It sounds very methodical.
It is. They're all numbered, and the idea was, well, that each one would be pretty much self-sufficient.
Self-sufficient how? Like, what does that mean in practice?
It means having its own local market, schools nearby, maybe a park, even medical centers, all packed into that sector.
Okay, so you wouldn't necessarily have to travel far for daily stuff.
Exactly. The aim, as Le Corbusier saw it, was to cut down on commutes, build local communities, make life more manageable.
Interesting. Does it actually work like that? Did the podcast suggest it feels less overwhelming?
Yeah, they seem to think it contributes to that feeling. It shapes how people interact, maybe in ways we don't always think about in cities that just grew organically.
And the planning didn't stop there, right? What about the roads?
No, the roads are part of it too. City Chronicles mentioned the V system, like V3 roads are for faster traffic.
Okay.
But then you have V7 roads. Those are specifically for pedestrians, cyclists.
So separating the different types of movement, that sounds smart. For efficiency and, well, safety too, I imagine.
Precisely. It wasn't an accident. It was a very deliberate attempt to make things flow better, reduce conflict between cars and people, just a more harmonious environment.
Now, we have to talk about Le Corbusier himself. His actual buildings. The podcast mentioned the Capitol complex.
Yes, absolutely central. That's where you find the High Court, the Secretariat, the Legislative Assembly, big, important civic buildings.
And they look imposing. Very modernist.
You mentioned form-following function when we chatted earlier. Can you break that down simply for us? How does it show up there?
Sure. So form follows function just means the building design is driven by what it's for. In the Capitol complex, think about the scale, the sort of blocky geometric shapes.
Yeah.
That wasn't just random style. It was meant to convey the power, the seriousness of government. And using things like raw concrete, clean lines that speaks to, well, durability, efficiency. Practical choices, too.
Got it. Okay. And within that complex, there's also the Open Hand Monument. That's quite famous, isn't it?
Very. Instantly recognizable. City Chronicles mention people taking photos, obviously. Yeah. But it's got that deeper meaning, right?
Yeah.
Le Corbusier intended it as a symbol peace, unity, being open to receiving and giving. Especially important for a newly independent nation.
A constant reminder built right into the city's core.
And this modernist feel, it isn't just the huge government buildings, is it? The podcast suggested it carries over into residential areas, too.
Yeah, that's a good point. Le Corbusier wanted a kind of visual consistency. So even in the housing sectors, you often see echoes of that clean, structured style. It creates a unified look across the city.
Okay, so we've got this very ordered, structured, distinct architecture. But Chandigarh is often called the city beautiful. That suggests more than just concrete. Nature, green spaces. City Chronicles really push this angle.
They did. Lots of talk about tree-lined roads, parks everywhere, gardens. A very green city.
They mentioned a meditative atmosphere. How does all that green space actually play out in daily life there? Is it just pretty, or does it do more, like for air quality or community stuff?
Well, the podcast implied it's more than just looks. All those trees obviously provide shade, which is crucial in that climate, helps cool things down a bit.
Right.
And the parks and gardens, they're not just empty spaces. They're used for walks, exercise, people meeting up. It fosters that community feeling, that sense of well-being. It was definitely a conscious part of the plan.
Then there's the rock garden. I mean, what a story. A sculpture garden made entirely from waste.
Isn't it incredible? Nekchand, the creator, he basically built it in secret initially, using broken pottery, old bangles, bits of industrial waste.
Wow. Why did he do it? Did the podcast get into his motivation? Was it like an environmental statement way ahead of its time, or just pure art?
The podcast highlighted his personal drive, his dedication. It wasn't necessarily framed as a big eco statement from the start, but the act itself. Transforming trash into art.
That is a powerful statement, isn't it? About
Yes.
resourcefulness, beauty, and unexpected places.
Yeah, absolutely. And it shows individual creativity can still bloom, even in a very planned environment.
Definitely. And right near the rock garden, you have Sukhna Lake.
Ah, yes. A
Yeah.
different kind of green space. Man-made, you said. That's right. A reservoir right at the base of the Shivalik Hills. It's hugely popular.
Popular for what? Just looking at...
No, much more than that. People are always there. Morning walks, evening strolls, paddle boating. The podcast mentioned watching the sunset there. It's a real escape, a place to unwind.
So this interesting mix, strict urban planning right next to natural spaces, and this amazing sort of outsider art project.
It is a fascinating contrast.
Okay, let's shift to the people, the culture, the lifestyle. What's it like living in this planned city?
The podcast described it as a blend. They said Punjabi energy and modern Indian sensibilities.
Punjabi energy and modern sensibilities. How does that actually show up day to day? Did they give examples like in how people socialize or celebrate?
They suggested you see that traditional warmth, the Punjabi hospitality, vibrant gatherings,
Yeah.
but mixed with a more, contemporary urban lifestyle. There's a big university, Punjab University.
For lots of students.
Yeah, so that probably adds a youthful, dynamic vibe. And the planned infrastructure itself kind of supports a modern way of living.
And politically, it's in a unique spot too. Capital of two states, Punjab and Haryana, but not really in either of them.
Exactly. It's a union territory, governed directly by the central government in Delhi.
How does that make a difference, being a union territory? Does it feel different for the people living there?
The podcast hinted that it might mean things like city development, maintenance, maybe happen more smoothly, potentially with less state-level political back and forth. It helps it keep its own distinct character, too.
And the people themselves. City Chronicles painted a picture, warm, stylish, proud, students hanging out, fashionable folks in Sector 17, families in the parks.
Yeah, it sounds like a community that appreciates both its heritage and its very modern setting. The podcast noted a strong fashion sense, boutique shops, even luxury cars, suggests a certain prosperity, maybe a focus on, style.
Okay, you can't talk about a place in India without talking about food.
Absolutely. And City Chronicles seem pretty excited about the food scene in Chandigarh.
They described it like the culture, a mix. Classic Punjabi food, which is amazing, but also lots of cafes, continental options.
It reflects that blend again, doesn't it? Tradition and modernity on a plate.
Did they give any must-try recommendations?
Oh, yeah. Parantha's stuffed flatbreads at a place called Pal Dhaba sounds essential. And milkshakes at the Indian Coffee House in Sector 17. Apparently that's a real institution.
Classic spots. But what about newer places?
They mentioned those too. Places like Backpackers Cafe and Nick Baker's were name-checked as popular, maybe more contemporary hangouts. So you've got options for whatever mood you're in.
And street food. Gotta have street food.
Of course. They mentioned golgappas, those little crispy shells with fillings, tikis, amritsari kulchas. You find them in the local markets. Always a great way to get a real taste of the city.
Sounds delicious. Okay, so beyond lifestyle and food, the podcast also touched on education and, maybe surprisingly, innovation.
Yeah, Punjab University gives it a strong academic reputation, a kind of intellectual backbone.
Right.
But it's also becoming something of a startup hub, especially with Mohali, a neighboring city, growing fast in IT.
So tech companies, co-working spaces, Chandigarh is evolving.
It seems like it. The podcast suggested it's trying to build on its planned foundation, but also embrace tech, new businesses, looking to the future without losing its, unique charm.
So putting it all together, the planning, the green spaces, the culture, the food, the new growth, it sounds like the quality of life could be pretty good there. The podcast even said it ranks highly in India.
They did, and they listed some reasons, things like lower crime rates compared to some other big cities, less pollution, which is a huge factor.
And the planned infrastructure probably just makes daily life easier, right? Less chaotic.
That's the idea, plus all the parks and activities we talked about. And they specifically mentioned safety, particularly for women, feeling safer there.
That's really significant.
Yeah, and even little things like well-lit roads, traffic that's maybe a bit more orderly than you might expect elsewhere in India, it all adds up.
It really sounds like those early planning decisions are still paying off for residents today.
Seems that way. So for anyone listening who's now thinking, maybe I should visit Chandigarh.
Right. Did City Chronicles offer any travel tips?
Yeah, a few practical ones. Best time to go is apparently October to March. The weather's nicer then.
Okay. Avoid the peak summer heat. What about packing?
Light cottons for warmer times, but maybe pack a light jacket or sweater for winter evenings. It can get a bit cool.
And how to get around?
They really recommended walking, just to soak it all in, see the layout, feel the atmosphere.
Makes sense in a planned city.
And renting a bike was another suggestion. A good way to cover a bit more ground but still be immersed. Plus, visit the museums and definitely try all the different food spots.
Good tips. It reinforces that idea of exploring Chandigarh at a human pace, really appreciating the design.
Yeah. So, wrapping up our deep dive, drawing on City Chronicles, what's the main picture of Chandigarh that stays with you?
For me, it's that incredible blend. Very intentional modern design living right alongside abundant nature and a culture that feels both rooted and forward-looking. It sounds like it offers a genuinely high quality of life.
I agree. It comes across as a really compelling place, meticulously planned, yes, but also green, vibrant, with its own distinct spirit. It definitely makes you think more about how the way we design cities impacts how we live in them, doesn't it?
It really does. A fascinating example. Thanks for unpacking it with me.
Yeah.